I dressed as a beggar to meet my grandson's new fiancée, and her reaction changed everything. Not just about her, about him, about the family I thought I had built, about the values I thought I had passed down through 50 years of living and loving and showing up for every single person who carried my blood. I walked into that restaurant in old clothes and a gray wig and shoes I bought from a thrift store for $3. And what happened at that table in the next 20 minutes dismantled things that I thought were permanent. If you are listening to this right now, stay with me, because this story starts as something that might sound like a game, like a test, like a clever grandmother with a plan. And yes, I had a plan. But what I did not have, what no plan can ever fully prepare you for, is the specific devastation of watching someone you raised look the other way while someone else is cruel. That silence, that particular chosen silence, that is what this story is really about. And before I go any further, tell me in the comments where you are listening from right now. Are you a grandparent who has felt the slow, quiet erasure that can come when your grandchildren build new lives and you are not sure where you fit in them? Are you someone who is listening and feeling, uncomfortably, a little like my grandson? I read every single comment because this story does not belong only to me. It belongs to every person who has ever been measured by someone who didn't know what they were measuring and found a way to show them exactly how wrong they were. Let me take you all the way back, not to the restaurant, not to the wig and the thrift store shoes, back to who I am and why I was willing to walk into a fine dining establishment looking like I had nowhere else to go, and why I had $100,000 in my bag when I did it. My name is Loretta Mae Hutchins. I am 73 years old. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1952, and if you know anything about Birmingham in 1952, you understand immediately that the world I arrived in was not a world that had been arranged for my comfort or dignity in mind. I grew up in a house with 6 children and 2 parents who worked with the specific, tireless efficiency of people who understand that rest is a luxury and that tomorrow requires preparation. My father was a janitor at a hospital for 31 years. My mother cleaned houses 5 days a week and cooked for her own family on the weekends and sang in the church choir on Sundays with a voice that did make the windows shake and the most stubborn hearts reconsider. They were not rich people. They were not famous people. They were not people whose names appeared on anything except church bulletins and the occasional letter from a school. But they were people of absolute, immovable character. My mother had a saying that I heard so many times it became part of the interior wallpaper of my mind. Loretta, how a person treats someone who can't do anything for them, that is the only measurement that matters. Everything else is performance. I have lived by that measurement for 73 years. I have applied it to every person I have let close to me, and I am here to tell you that it has never once failed to tell me exactly what I needed to know. I married Harold Hutchins when I was 26. Harold was a quiet, deliberate man with enormous hands and a gift for carpentry that bordered on the spiritual. He could look at a piece of wood and see the thing it was supposed to become before he'd made a single cut. He built furniture. He built our house, literally, with his own hands and the help of 2 friends over the course of 2 summers. He built a business, Hutchins Fine Woodwork, that started in a garage and grew over 30 years into something that supplied custom cabinetry and furniture to commercial contractors across 3 states. He was not loud about what he built, he just built it. Harold passed 11 years ago. I still talk to him sometimes, not in a worrying way, just in the way of a person who spent 42 years with someone and finds their voice still living somewhere in the quiet. I talk to him when I am making decisions. I talked to him the night before I went to that restaurant. Harold and I had 2 children. Our daughter, Patricia, lives in Houston. She's a school principal and the most organized person I have ever encountered in my life, which may be its own form of overcompensation given the organized chaos of the childhood we gave her. James lives 10 minutes from me, which is one of the great and complicated blessings of my life. James has a son, my grandson. His name is Garrett. Garrett Hutchins is 28 years old. He's tall. He got that from Harold. We Hutchins women are not tall people. And he has a laugh that starts in his chest, exactly like Harold's did. He was, for the 28 years before the events of this story, my particular joy. Not more than my other grandchildren. I have 4 in total, Patricia's 2 girls and James's 2 boys. But Garrett was the one who called just to talk, the one who came for Sunday dinner not because he was summoned, but because he wanted to, the one who sat with me after Harold died and didn't try to fill the silence with comfort, just sat in it with me because he understood that some silences need company more than they need noise. I thought I knew who Garrett was. I thought the values Harold and I had poured into this family, the ones that started with my parents and their parents before them, that had been carried through poverty and segregation and every form of difficulty this country has a talent for producing. I thought those values had taken root in Garrett in the way they had taken root in Patricia and James, deep, durable, the kind that hold their shape under pressure. The restaurant showed me I needed to look more carefully. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about Amber first. I asked if he had brought her to Sunday dinner yet. He said they were working on finding a time. 6 months went by. No Sunday dinner, no meeting at all. I heard about Amber entirely through the narrated version Garrett offered, which is always, no matter how loving, a version, a curated thing. The person described in someone else's love is never quite the person who exists. When Garrett called me in October to say he had proposed and Amber had said yes and they were engaged, I was happy for him, genuinely. I have no interest in being the grandmother who cannot let a grandchild build a life. I wanted him to be loved. I wanted him to have what Harold and I had, the real, daily, unglamorous partnership of 2 people who chose each other constantly over many years. I wanted that for him. But something in me, the something that has been listening to my mother's measurement for 73 years, something was paying close attention, and it said, "You have not met this woman yet. You do not know what she is made of. You know the performance. You do not know the person." And that was when I decided to find out. I want to explain the thinking behind what I did because I am aware that it can sound eccentric. Perhaps it is eccentric. Harold would have said I was the most practical eccentric he had ever met, and he would have said it with love, so I have always taken it as a compliment. I did not dress as a beggar to humiliate Amber. I did not do it as a game or a trick or an entertainment. I did it because there is no faster or more reliable way to know what a person is made of than to show them someone who appears to have nothing and watch what they do with the next 5 minutes. My mother knew this. She had lived it from both sides. She had been the woman people looked through, the invisible woman in the kitchen, the person who didn't register in rooms built for other people. And she had eyes like instruments. She could read a person's character in the way they addressed her when she was mopping a floor versus the way they addressed her when she was in her Sunday clothes. I was not going to wait another 6 months for a Sunday dinner that never materialized. I was not going to be managed and scheduled and presented at a time and in a context that had been curated to everyone else's comfort. I was going to walk into the place where Amber was most herself, a fine restaurant, her natural habitat, the environment in which she had arranged herself to appear at her best, and I was going to be the one thing that environment was not prepared for. I did it methodically. I'm a methodical person. I went to Goodwill on a Tuesday. I bought a coat that had once been beige and was now the color of a compromise. I bought shoes that fit and were clean, but were visibly old, the specific old of things that have been worn too many times by too many people. I found a dress that was respectable at some point in its history and was now just present. I already owned a gray wig. I had worn it years ago for a church play and kept it in a box the way you keep things you are not sure you will need but cannot bring yourself to discard. I borrowed glasses from the costume box at my church's drama ministry, the kind with thick frames and slightly too large lenses. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like someone's forgotten aunt. I looked like someone the hostess would be uncertain about protocol. I looked like someone Amber Presley would categorize in under 3 seconds. Good. I called Garrett and told him I had been trying to find a time to meet Amber and that I had heard they were having dinner at Maison Beaumont on Saturday evening. I had heard this from James, who had heard it from Garrett, and I asked if I could join them, just briefly, just to finally put a face to the name. Garrett was pleased. He said, of course. He said Amber would love it. He did not know what I was wearing. I called my bank the day before and had a cashier's check prepared, $100,000. I have, over the years of Harold's business and its growth and the careful management of what he built, accumulated a life that looks nothing like the dress I was planning to wear on Saturday. But that is the point. That has always been the point. I put the check in my purse, I put the purse under the coat, and on Saturday evening I took a cab to Maison Beaumont and walked through the front door of one of the finest restaurants in the city, looking like I had taken a wrong turn somewhere. The hostess noticed me the moment I walked in. I could see the calculation happening, the quick assessment, the uncertainty of protocol, the specific discomfort of someone's job requires a certain standard of gatekeeping encountering a situation the training manual did not fully cover. I gave her Garrett's name. She found the reservation. She led me to the table with the careful neutrality of a professional doing her level best. Garrett was already there. He stood when he saw me, that is how I raised him to stand when someone approaches the table, and he came around to greet me, and I watched, over his shoulder, as Amber's face performed its assessment. The coat, the dress, the shoes, the wig, the glasses, all of it processed in under 2 seconds with the rapid, experienced eye of a woman who has spent her career in luxury brand marketing, which is to say a career entirely built on the instantaneous categorization of things as acceptable or not acceptable. Her smile stayed in place, but it was the smile of effort, not feeling, the kind that involves more muscle than warmth. Garrett introduced us. Amber, this is my grandmother Loretta. Nana, this is Amber. Amber extended her hand with the precision of someone performing graciousness. She said it was wonderful to finally meet you. She said Garrett talked about you all the time. She said you must be so proud of him. All the right words, all of them landing about 2 inches away from genuine. I sat down. I ordered water. I looked at Amber and I thought, let's see who you actually are. For the first 10 minutes, she was careful, the way people are careful when they are performing for an audience of one. She asked me polite questions, how I was feeling, how the drive over was, had I been to this restaurant before. I answered simply. I let my answers be small. I let the conversation breathe in the way that reveals people when they stop performing and start reacting. A waiter came to refresh the bread basket. He was a young man, college-aged, with the slightly distracted air of someone whose shift had started 4 hours ago. He reached across the table and his sleeve caught the edge of Amber's water glass. It did not spill. It wobbled, resettled, and was fine. But Amber turned to him with a look that I can only describe as the expression of someone who has decided that a person in a service position has no feelings that need consideration. She said in a voice that was not quiet, "Watch what you're doing." Just that, cold and flat and certain of its right to be so. The waiter apologized. He stepped back. Garrett said nothing. I noted it. 20 minutes into our dinner, a couple was seated at the table beside ours. The woman was elderly, older than me, moving slowly, helped into her chair by what appeared to be her son. She was dressed simply, nicely, but simply, and I watched Amber's eyes move to that table, assess it, and come back to ours with the particular micro-expression of someone who has just confirmed a social boundary. And then Amber leaned slightly toward Garrett. She thought she was being quiet. She was not being quite quiet enough. She said, "Can you ask them to move us? The atmosphere over here is a bit much." I looked at Garrett. He looked at his menu. I noted it. And then, and this is the moment, the one I had been waiting for, the one that I did not engineer but that arrived as if on schedule, a woman appeared at the entrance to the dining room. She was perhaps my age, perhaps older. She was not dressed for the restaurant. She had a paper cup from a fast food place and the specific, careful dignity of someone who is cold and tired and has come inside for warmth with the full knowledge that she is not entirely welcome. She looked around the room with the expression of someone deciding something. The hostess moved toward her with a polite but firm energy of someone about to redirect. I watched Amber's face. And then Amber turned to Garrett, not quietly this time, not with any particular concern for who might hear, and said, "Get this stinking woman away from our table." The woman was not at our table. She was across the room. But the words landed in the space between us like something dropped from a height. The waiter who had wobbled the glass heard it. The couple at the next table heard it. I am almost certain Garrett heard it because I saw something move across his face, quickly, immediately, and then I watched him make the decision. I watched him pick up his menu and look at it. He said nothing. 73 years, my mother's measurement. Every person I have ever needed to understand. In that moment, I did not need another piece of information. I had everything I needed, not just about Amber, but about what my grandson had chosen to become in her presence, about the silence he had decided was acceptable, about who he was when someone was watching and who he was when he thought no one important was. I was someone important. I had just apparently stopped being visible as such. I set down my water glass. I stood up. I stood up slowly, not dramatically, not with the energy of a scene being made, with the energy of a woman who has made a decision and is implementing it with full composure. Amber looked at me with the expression of someone who is not sure whether they are about to witness an embarrassment or cause one. I reached up and I took off the wig. My own hair, silver, natural, cut close to my head in the way I have worn it for 15 years because Harold said it was the most dignified thing he had ever seen, and I believed him. My own hair was underneath. I took off the costume glasses. I straightened my posture, which I had been slightly curving all evening in the way of someone trying to take up less space. I let myself be my full height, which is not impressive in inches, but is, I have been told, fairly substantial in presence. Amber's face went through several things in rapid succession. I opened my purse. I took out the envelope from my bank. I placed it on the table in front of her, flat, without ceremony. I said, "I was going to give this to you both today, a wedding gift, $100,000, to start your life together with something real, something Harold and I built over 40 years so that the people who came after us would have something under their feet." I paused. I looked at her directly. "I came here today the way I am dressed because the only thing I have ever needed to know about a person is who they are when they think the person in front of them has nothing. My mother taught me that. She cleaned other people's houses for 20 years, and she was the wisest person I have ever known, and she could read a soul in 5 minutes by watching how they treated someone invisible." I looked at the envelope. "You told a tired woman across a restaurant to get away from your table. You spoke to a young man doing his job like he was something in your way, and my grandson—" I looked at Garrett, who had put down his menu and was looking at me with an expression I will carry for the rest of my life. "My grandson sat here and let it happen." Both of those things told me what I needed to know. I picked the envelope back up. I put it back in my purse. I said, I was going to give this to you, but now I think I'll donate it to the shelter 3 blocks from here, where that woman will probably sleep tonight. The table was very quiet. The tables around us were very quiet. I am almost certain Garrett heard it because I saw something move across his face, quickly, immediately, and then I watched him make the decision. I watched him pick up his menu and look at it. He said nothing. The table was very quiet. The tables around us were very quiet. I am almost certain I have never had a room's attention so completely while making so little noise. I looked at Amber one more time. I said, I hope you find what you're looking for. I genuinely do. But I need you to understand that this family, my family, the one Harold and I built, it was built by people who mopped floors and built furniture with their hands and sang in church choirs and treated every human being like they mattered regardless of what they were wearing. That is not a small thing. That is not a sweet thing. That is everything. And I will not write a check to a life that is being built on a different foundation. I picked up my purse. I straightened my coat, the beige one, the Goodwill one. I nodded to the couple at the next table. I walked past the hostess, who held the door open and looked at me with an expression that, bless her heart, seemed close to applause. And I went outside into the evening air, and I called a cab, and I went home. Garrett called that night. I did not answer. Not because I was punishing him, because I had nothing to say yet that was ready to be said. I needed to sit with it first, to let it settle into its real shape before I spoke. He called the next morning. I answered. He did not make excuses. That surprised me. I had prepared myself for excuses, for the explaining away, for the reframing. Instead, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, Nana, I'm ashamed of myself. 4 words. The right 4 words. I said, tell me why. He said, because I heard it, all of it. I heard what she said to the waiter and I let it go. I heard what she said about the woman at the door and I said nothing. And I knew you were watching. And I chose my menu instead of saying something because I didn't want a scene. He stopped. And then you stood up and there was no scene. There was just the truth, and it was worse than any scene could have been. I said, what are you going to do? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I don't know yet. I need to think. I said, think carefully. Not about the money. I need you to hear me on this. Not about the check. Think about who you were at that table tonight. Think about whether that is the person you want to keep being, whether the life you are building with Amber is one that has room in it for what this family is made of, whether you can sit across from your father and Patricia and me on Sunday dinner in 5 years and be the same person you were tonight without feeling it. He said, I already feel it. Good. Feeling it is where it starts. The engagement did not end immediately. I will not pretend this story has the clean resolution that perhaps it deserves. Real life is untidier than that. Garrett and Amber had hard conversations. I know this because Garrett told me, not because I asked. He told her about what the evening had actually been, about the wig and the test and the check, and his grandmother who built her life out of the same quiet, unglamorous dignity that Amber had been dismissing across a restaurant table. He told her what he was ashamed of. He asked her to tell him honestly whether she understood why. Amber, to her partial credit, was not immediately dismissive. She was defensive first, which is human, and then, apparently, something shifted. I do not know what shifted it. I do not know the full interior of another person's change, and I am cautious about claiming I do. What I know is that 3 weeks after the restaurant, she called me. Not a long call, not an emotional one. She said, "Mrs. Hutchins, I've been thinking about what happened, and I'd like to come for Sunday dinner, if that's still possible." I said, "It's always been possible. The door was never locked." She came for Sunday dinner 6 weeks after the restaurant. She wore simple clothes. She helped set the table without being asked. When my neighbor, Miss Eudora, stopped by — Miss Eudora is 81, moves slowly, and tends to talk at length about her garden and her late husband's tendency to mislabel seed packets — Amber sat across from her for 45 minutes and asked questions that sounded, if not entirely effortless, then at least genuinely attempted. She helped wash up afterwards without a word about it. I watched her the way my mother taught me to watch, looking for who she was when she thought the performance was over. The jury, as Harold used to say, is still deliberating, but they are deliberating. That is more than I had after the restaurant. That is something. The check, the $100,000, I did donate a portion of it to a shelter, not 3 blocks from Maison Beaumont, but to one in our community that Harold had quietly supported for years without telling anyone. It felt right. It felt like him. I also kept a portion aside, in an envelope in my filing cabinet, because I have not closed the door on anything. I just needed to know who was walking through it. My mother mopped floors. My father cleaned hospitals. Harold built furniture with his hands and never once raised his voice to tell anyone what he was worth. I grew up in Birmingham in 1952, and I have lived long enough to watch the world change in ways that would have seemed impossible to the child I was. And I have also lived long enough to know that some things do not change at all. The measurement does not change. How a person treats someone who can do nothing for them, that is still the only measurement that matters. Everything else is still performance. I dressed as a beggar to meet my grandson's fiancée, because I needed to know what she was made of before I gave her my blessing, my presence, and the accumulated love of a family that was built without shortcuts on foundations that cost real people real things. I am not sorry I did it. I would do it again. What I did not expect, what no plan accounts for, was finding out simultaneously what my grandson was made of in that moment, what he chose when choosing was required. That was the harder finding. That is the one I sat with longest, because you can evaluate a stranger and protect yourself from what you find. Evaluating your own family, the people you helped form, the values you thought you had given, and finding something missing, something that requires work, that lives in a different part of the chest entirely. Garrett is working. I believe that. I believe the shame he expressed was real because I know the difference between performed shame and actual shame. 73 years has given me that much. And I believe that who we are in our worst moments is not the final answer, as long as we are honest about what those moments showed us and willing to do something about it. I believe in him. I am just no longer willing to believe in him quietly, without cost, without the expectation that love runs in more than one direction. If you are listening to this right now and you are someone whose worth has been overlooked because of how you look, where you come from, what you wear, how much you have, I want to say this directly. You are the measurement. How people treat you is the measurement, not of you, of them. And you are allowed to act on what you find, quietly, completely, and with the full weight of everything you have built behind you. My name is Loretta Mae Hutchins. My mother cleaned houses. My father cleaned hospitals. My husband built furniture with his hands. And I walked into a fine restaurant in a Goodwill coat with a $100,000 check in my purse. And I walked out with exactly the information I went in for. Know your worth. Know what you carry. and make sure the people at the table know it too. Thank you, truly and completely, for staying with me through every word of this. If this story landed somewhere real in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and leave me a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me about your Loretta, the woman in your life who mopped floors and moved mountains. Tell me about your grandmother, your mother, the woman who showed you what dignity actually looks like when it isn't performing for anyone. I'll be reading. I always am.